innovative laboratory for the humanities at the University of Kentucky. So on behalf of the Gaines Center, I would like to welcome you to the 2020 Bale Boone Symposium. Although there was an earlier iteration since 1998, the Bale Boone Symposium in the Humanities has called together campus, community, and the Commonwealth to promote dialogues and intellectual exploration. This moment also provides me with the opportunity to thank Chelsea Breslin, who's the Associate Director of the Gaines Center, and Connie Duncan, our administrator, for standing with me as we forged a new way of being in this virtual world while we were each grappling with the challenges of this time. And finally, I would like to offer tremendous thanks to the Bale Boone family, whose gift was given as a testament to the influence and memory of Joy Bale Boone and George Street Boone, who were committed to the betterment of the humanities. So to introduce our speaker, I first met Nikky Finney through her words. When I was a new professor at the University of Kentucky, I read a speech she gave to the entering class that had been reprinted in the Kentucky Kernel, which I posted outside my office door the entire first semester I was here at the university. It would be years before I would read any of her work, any of her poems. Having spent most of my adult life in academia surrounded by people asking often very narrow questions, I generally only know the surface of what most of my colleagues do. After months of confounded looks on the faces of friends and colleagues familiar with her work, every time I said, "She's nice, isn't that enough? I don't think I need to read these poems." One day I reached on a shelf in her house that I was renting while she was on leave with multiple copies of her book and read "The World is Round." I read from the first line to the last stanza of every poem she had in print within 2 weeks, and I am still reading. Nikky Finney was a professor of English and creative writing at the University of Kentucky for 23 years. Her presence is still missed on our campus and in our community. She is now the John H. Bennett Jr. Endowed Professor of Creative Writing and Southern Letters at the University of South Carolina. Nikky is the author of 5 collections of poetry and other creative works. In 2011, she won the National Book Award for Head Off and Split. And just last month, she was given the Wallace Stevens Award, which is a lifetime achievement honor presented by the American Academy of Poets, where the judges praised her writing and her, quote, "fierce moral conviction," unquote, and status as a bard for the African diaspora. Unlike some in the academy, Nikky's work is neither narrow nor rarefied, despite the space she has carved for herself in the academy. It is equal parts high art, historical canon, and Easter piece. So reading from her latest collection of poetry, Love Child's Hotbed of Occasional Poetry, the Gaines Center is honored to present Nikky Finney.
Thank you, Dr. Melinda Price, and hello to my second home. I am really, really honored to be invited by the Gaines Center and the University of Kentucky and Dr. Price and her team to come tonight and share some poems with you. I've been looking forward to this ever since I shipped Love Child off to the publisher. I'm a slow turtle-like writer. I don't publish books that often. And so one of the first thoughts that crossed my mind was I'll be able to return to Kentucky, maybe Memorial Hall, maybe the library, maybe someplace, and I'll be able to see people that I haven't seen in a long time, 7 years. I left in 2013. And it didn't happen that way, as you well know. But I'm still really, really happy to be here, and that will come in the future, hopefully. But I just want to read a few poems from the new book, and I really want to talk to you. Really want to know who's out there. I really want to tell a few stories in between the poems that are stories that stay with me no matter where I am in the world, that have everything to do with Kentucky. But I want to start, if you would give me your attention about, I'm long-winded. Let me just say that. I write long poems. I'm not going to read you the longest poems tonight, I promise. We only have about 35, 40 minutes, but I did want to start off this evening by reading a poem that's right in the heart of the book, Love Child's Hotbed of Occasional Poetry. And I really want to read it because it has everything to do with one of Kentucky's native sons, Gurney Norman. And Gurney was really one of the top 3 reasons I stayed in Kentucky when I got there, for not for as long as I did, but just you'll hear what he did to sort of like remind me of where I was, and it made all the difference in the world. We can talk about that later. It's a poem called Brother of the Back Way. On the occasion of arriving in Kentucky and being guided to the back roads and along the old waterways by a native son, Gurney Norman. 1989. I would have gone to Kentucky, but I never would have stayed if not for the first 20 minutes of our visit. His poet hands lost in the twin minds of his pockets. Real glad you're here, he said. A searching man stands to welcome me. I'm still not sure I'm in the right place. My first day on the job, and stuffed in my new teacher box, a bundle of books tied like a fetish to the back of a bear. He knows the secret of a knot, stories never heard before, spilling hill after hill of brown yellowing pages, family dramas soaked in turpentine and struck match, scenes of still life of owls, visions and signs, the African presence in the mountains, Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia, North Carolina, hundreds of bottled up years of American history. I thought I was up on my Black history, but I never knew we had lived so far up the mountain's winding roads. Never knew Africans had restrung their banjos way up the slip slide to keep themselves alive. He sent me a map along with everything else, the Appalachian Mountains red marked, colored in by his steady hand. Gurney Norman was teaching me even before I'd met my first class. The Human Politics of Geography 101, how land is just a hole in the ground unless you have people to fill it all in. Whispering mouths opening and closing from every new bundle, article, and book. I locate my birthplace near the mouth of the Atlantic. He has already circled it in blue, along with my grandparents' farm high up in the Southern Carolinas. All of this has been arrowed and tied tight with beaver sinew, right around the Kentucky River Basin where my life has just landed. The heart lines now stretch from my lungs to the legs of mountains that are as fat as duck eggs. He's some kind of poet pioneer with an old prospector's understanding about what the land can teach us about ourselves. He's mining for a deeper vein, knowing if I listen, I'll come to see how the mountains connect like open hands across human divides. Cinched in the body of a grid, blue and red lines on the thin blackboard of a tree, resembling extra long human fingers stretching, holding on. I tape the map to my new office wall. It yellows there in place for 23 years, becoming the prayer cloth my eyes hold on to every time I ask myself, what in the world am I doing in Kentucky? 2. Years of listening to Gurney talk about all the back ways of disappearing life meant it was time we hit the road. We leave the little city of perfect horse farms, headed to Highlander Center in the North Carolina hills. We are the human book laid out flat within the mountain's view. Nothing is written on our pages yet. On our way to Boone, easily an afternoon drive by regular asphalt, but we go Gurney's back way instead. Avoiding every main road, it takes a week to go 20 country miles. Rambling along in his last of a kind car that feels held together by the worn hooks and twine of fishing stories that clench us tight like a fist in a once upon a time smooth hand. Nobody's mind ever reaches for the radio. Our hearts drop a gear and gladly leave the little city behind. There is no uncomfortable quiet to fill. We amble through the great thickets and creek beds, pedaling through history and dusty culture, places way off paved memory. I realize he's intent on turning us nouveau, pseudo-intellectual pollinators into the honey itself. He is determined to slow us down, mindful to bring us in close to something he knows we are losing by the micro minute. Gurney tells his long-legged stories. We listen and ask our questions. When we can get a word in edgewise, and when we can't, nothing is lost. In the back seat, my head gets heavy with all the names we've lost to all the progress. Soon my mind bobbles along the ridge of the worn leather seat. When I wake up, Gurney's in the middle of another story with all new names. I lean into his endless commas and I am never lost. We are in a one-room motor home schoolhouse and Gurney knows each and every waterway on a first name basis. Cane Run, Clark's Run, Hanging Fork, Redbird River, Wolf Run, waterways that people traveled down before any of the great four-laners came to be. He pauses for emphasis. This is the well-worn path, the one we followed to get where we needed to be. He talks about the swirls and circles of houses that grew up around the waterways, right where his old car stops to purr, then quickly idles strong. They no longer exist, at least not to our eyes. But Gurney's eyes still see every wavy window pane and smokestack. He keeps emptying and passing his cup. We sip slow on the way people used to be, the way they learned who they were to the world and to each other before the big city and the unforgiving concrete covered up all the foxholes and bare paths and piped in the artificial sound of progress for a new century's counterfeit comfort. I'm listening to Gurney, but my eyes are outside the window, gathered around a wilderness bend that has no eye end in sight. He laughs to himself, not really needing us, remembering how people used to fight one day and get back to depending on each other the next. We needed each other, he says, more than we needed to stay mad. From the small back seat, his words are a moving picture show of warmth and wonder. In my journal, I scribble along with the bumps in the road. Our memories are stronger than any paved parkway, is what I write. We stop at a crossroads and Gurney cuts the engine, but never stops talking about the land or the people who bloomed out of tobacco fields and hickory forests. We stop to eat at the place he's been itching to get to since we left, a restaurant just off the main road where he's ordered country fried steak for 40 years. He pops out of the car like a kid headed straight for Christmas morning, nodding and waving at everybody like they just saw each other yesterday. I bless my food like I was taught to do and add a line of memory and grace for all the understanding the world has missed by not sitting down together. We are poets of Appalachia, and the Atlantic Ocean. We are careful not to stare, and the well-loved food readies us for mountain air. We reach Highlander Center before the owls begin calling to each other. Gurney disappears, scoots off like a gray fox, released back to the wild shadows of his own world. Cool wind and speckled rocks swallow him whole. His legs turn wild. His whiskers lasso a world beyond us. He evaporates as quick as a mountain cat's morning breath. He's more at home in these blue hills than anywhere. All the words he's been saying and the stories he's been telling can't compete with all that's in front and around us now in lush green surround sound. He's hauled us gently here to where we needed to be. Now it's time to crawl inside what we have been driving to in our mighty snail of a car. He's left us now with his cave stories and his sticky baptizing rivers. It's time to take the words in even closer and sip on the silence that is here, but disappearing fast. He wants us to do what he's been talking about all the way up. Us, young folks, who thought enough to name ourselves poets. He wants us to think about the world that was here before we got so smart and full of ourselves, the world about to be lost to our children. He wants us asking if there's anything we can do about it. Wants us to quit writing so much and put our soft hands and whiny shoulders to the starry wheel. We split up. I walk around the mountain to find my own view. My breath changes with every angle that my skin sees and feels. The salt and cloud cover, the wildest blue wildflowers. It's too much beauty to handle in one flashing moment. We stand there on different sides of rock and rail, like two hands of a clock, until the last light moves all the way down the road without permission, and the owls get even friendlier with each other. Our tongues have lowered themselves down deep into a conch shell for the rest of the night. We are framed by the fog and the mountain, in the shale and fossil of stories loosed and untongued. The high, high lonesome of the ivory bill, still echoing through the chokecherry, even as we pray to one day hear his red and black wings once again. We are consumed with family, loss, mosquitoes, and the unopaque future. A trickle of salamanders moving through cracks in the shimmering limestone. We are wordless and lightning bolt alive, staring at a canopy of earth with ears that have heard Gurney promise it is all right to stare back into the eyes of the lapis lazuli night without protection. In this moment, everything that matters is in full view. There are no supporting actors waiting in the wings. Every greedy man-made thing dangling with a price tag has sunk into the darkness to be properly cleaned up by the starlight. We are three shivering specks in the shadow of the power of the land, loud thumping heart witnesses to the truth of how we are wholly bound by the sweet back waterways of life. Finally, this is the old country tune that pounds my heart into the hot black iron of restless sleep. Thank you, Gurney. Thank you for that poem, and thank you for that trip. Thank you for that old car, and thank you for that reminder of what's important in the world. I've never forgotten it. The poem ends, it says, we are three shivering specks. I had to edit out this, I said I was long-winded. This poem is 4 pages long, and I think it was actually 7 pages before I had to edit out the fact that the great Kentucky poet Frank X. Walker was there on that trip as well. And sorry, Frank, I had to edit you out. I owe you one for that. But the focus had to come back in. But I left that 3 in there so that would be evident of the factual that you were on that trip too. So that's Brother of the Back Way. And it's a really important poem in the collection. And it's on the, right after the poem ends, there's a picture of a box of pencils, Blackfeet Indian pencils that I actually found in the first house I lived in Kentucky in 1989 on Aylesford Avenue, 348 Aylesford, I believe. I think now it's a frat house. But I lived in there for that year. There was a professor who went on a sabbatical, and I took over for that year, 1989 through 1990. We can talk about that later. I've been thinking about what should I read to you tonight, and so many things come to mind. There's so many poems in this book about Kentucky. So I'll just read a few and see where we go. This book has poems in it, and it also has things called hotbeds, which we can talk about. But hotbeds are really narrative moments that were plucked out of my journal. I'm a real fastidious journal keeper. I've been keeping journals since I was about 10. And so this book came together because I looked through my journals and said, you know, some of this would be really nice, would work really nice next to some of the poems I'm working on. So this is called Hotbed number 6. A hotbed, for those of us who are not gardeners, is where you put an idea or you put a seed to grow into the plant that you will then put into the garden that will become the poem, metaphorically speaking. In my 16th year of living in Kentucky, I buy my first house. Soon after, my neighbors across the street announced they are leaving the bluegrass and moving to Arizona. I am not the reason they want to go, but it crosses my mind. Our yards stare across the street at each other. She is a hardworking postal worker. He, a grumpy, petulant man who doesn't smile much. I see a kindness in him that he doesn't want seen. He and I are home most days, so we are known to each other's eyes. I speak to him because I was taught to speak to people even if they don't have much to say in return. As he finishes packing the moving van on their last day in Kentucky, I finish mulching my fire azalea. Out of the corner of my eye, I watch him dig something up out of his yard. It is that sweet watermelon-sized rose quartz that was the reason for our first conversation. My love for rocks and stones and this deeply planted quartz gave us something uncommon to feel common about. His face opened to almost a smile when I called the rock by name, even though we never talked about it again. It sat there strangely in the yard, half in, half out of the hard clinging Kentucky clay. With both hands now cupped around it, he walks it across our shared street. I stand up and he puts the 10 pounds of cotton candy tourmaline into my hands. Backing up quickly, he is all the way in his yard as I continue to call out his name. I want to give it back to him. I don't feel I know him well enough to accept something so precious. But he has turned his back and disappeared. Their truck pulls out before sunset. They each wave a different kind of goodbye, and I leave the stone rose rock on the porch for weeks, watching it out of the corner of my eye while I read the paper. When I finally bring it inside, I move it from room to room, looking for the right light to help me see what it knows of why it is here. The months come and go. I grow closer to it, sometimes even leaning in to touch its dazzling watermelon skin when I walk into the room. A year later, my former neighbor takes his gun and blows the life out of his wife's small postal worker body, then blows the life out of his own. When news of this arrives, my legs fork into twin rivers. The next morning, I make my way upstairs, lift the rose quartz melon up and walk it down and out the back door. I place it on the ground beside the ginkgo that I planted a few years before. For a while, it has its own yard spot, just under a small circle of open sky that the tree limbs never seem to completely block out. From the window of the study, I can glimpse it while I write. In the spring, when the rain comes, it pounds the stone unmercifully until it finally yields what it knows. After the great pounding, blood pools in the yard in much the same way blood pools on the tile floor of that all metal windowless room that I have often wondered about but never seen the inside of. that none of us ever gets to see the inside of except on television. That room where the chest cavity is opened with something gruesomely sharp and the heart is plucked, weighed, measured, and judged for all its time spent on earth. Hotbed number 6. This is a true story. I'm not going to read, I'm going to make you curious, hopefully. There's a poem on page 98 called From the Wash House Files. And I consciously did not buy a washing machine or dryer until I was, I think, 46, 47. I used to go to the wash house that's across from the Starbucks in Lexington, where all the students come and all the community people come and all the Mexican brothers and sisters come and do their laundry. It was the most amazing place for me to see humanity. And so I didn't want to buy a washer and dryer because I got so many poems out of that laundry house. We can talk about that. But there is a poem called From the Wash House Files. And I started writing it in the early 80s and I didn't finish it until I published this book. So it was a poem that was 20 years in the making. So just wanted to let you know that was in there. Not to entice you to buy the book or anything like that. That would be rude of me. Hotbed 49. It's hunting season and I'm driving Highway 26 across the Congaree River. One exit remains before my exit home. A man is coming toward me riding against the traffic. He is a man who should not be riding his bicycle in the emergency lane of this dangerous highway, but he is. He rides fast as if he is being chased, but no one is behind him. He rides fast as if he knows he only has a small window of time. He is holding on to the wobbling bike handles with only his right hand. The front legs of a 10-point buck are curled around his right shoulder. The buck's 10-point antlers, his half-closed eyes, open, gaping mouth, and dangling tongue are held near the bicyclist's dark brown left cheek. His left arm is locked into place. I slow down as he passes by, to be sure I am seeing what I'm seeing. A black man on a bright orange bike, on a 4-laner, with a dead deer splayed across his shoulders like a mink. There is blood dripping down his white shirt, but his smile is as wide as the Congaree River. His fast pedaling legs tell me this winter will be different for him. This winter, in his shotgun of a house, there will be meat. These things called hotbeds are they're just things I notice in a day and can't get out of my mind. I tell my students all the time, and it's the truth. Being a poet really isn't very special. It's not, you're not anointed with any kind of special powers. You just can't get the image of something or the idea of something out of your mind until you write about it. And so your job is to write it down and to work it out into something that's not private for your journal. I do that kind of writing, but it's something that you want to share with a listening audience. You want to see their face when you say that there's blood dripping down the deer's antlers onto his cheek. You know, like you want to watch that and you want to see that your revisions work in that way. And you want them to wonder, what is that man doing on that bike, right? So I write to communicate something, to open up the doors of humanity and the windows and not let CNN and all those other news sources define who we are. It's why the humanities matter so much. It's why the Gain Center is so precious. You know, I just did something similar at Virginia Tech, and the humanities, you know, those teachers who will never give up on teaching students what is important, you know, hand, head, heart. That's why we send our children to school, to learn that, not just learn business, not just learn law, but to really learn who they are and how they manifest themselves in this society. So this is one of the reasons I love the Gain Center, and one of the reasons I love that Dr. Price is now leading the way there. What else can I read you? Let's see. Okay, so in this book, let's see, I have little notes. These are the streets I lived on when I lived in Lexington. 348 Aylesford, 412 West 2nd Street, 612 North Broadway, 258 East Belcourt, and 621 Sayre. And there's one more, I can't think of the address. I don't know, I just pulled that out of my journal. So I love letters. I love letter writing. I'm a big proponent of letter writing. There's something about the handwriting. And so one of the things that you will find in this new book are some letters from my father. My father plays a very prominent role in this book. It's a long story, but he wrote me hundreds of letters. And one of them is on his official stationery. And it says, "Sweet darling," never dated anything. "Sweet darling, you are the best writer I know and the world's greatest con artist alive. I love you anyway. Love, Papa, Dad, the Fox." It's a longer story. And then I wrote my mom. She left one summer to go and get some summer courses in. She was an elementary education school teacher. And I wrote her on July 5th, 1968, which means I was 11 years old, or about to be 11. I was 10. And the publisher put the letter in the book as it appears in lime green stationery, lime green 10-year-old stationery. And it says, and it has my first attempt at a poem in it, which is why the letter made it. And it's so many mistakes and terrible handwriting, but I'm 10. "Dear Mom, I hope you're having a wonderful time down there. All of us miss you very much. I have some bad news for you. Jerry," that's my brother, little brother, "broke your car light with the hammer, but just one. Mrs. Davis gives her love. Hope you don't get too lonely down there. You received a big package from your class. Mother, please write me and not Daddy. You have received a lot of mail. I hope you have a package for me. I wrote a poem for you. It's crazy. When you get old and out of shape, remember girdles are $2.98. Ha ha. I have decided my birthday present is a watch and perfume. Mom, who's your roommate? How old is she? Is she nice? Is she fat? Is she skinny? Does she snore? What's her name? That's all for now. Please write me back. All my love. Lynn is my first name, so I wrote Lynn Davenport. Davenport is my mother's maiden name. Why I put that there, I have no idea. The Lyric Theater, Lyceum of Dreams. On the occasion of the reopening of the Lyric Theater, 1940s Black Dream House, Lexington, Kentucky. On the East End, we shine our own shoes, dress our own legs, smooth down willful hair, let all new troubles float, done up. We promenade and pass, do wees, do as you please, and third, where Winkfield and Murphy once hoofed and flew backwards, black-winged on horseback, under the blazing marquee, we hand our shiny quarter over, glide toward, then across our 8-point star, rose tile light of regeneration. In the dark theater, the salt cod sweat of work, now left behind, names hurled our way all day, now set aside, paychecks that never match our labor folded away now. The house lights dim. Paul Robeson is Othello. Miss Ella strikes and swings. The Duke and Count jazz juice the night. Royalty speaks to royalty. The ink spots spill all with Sarah Vaughan. Miss Mahalia orchestrates and moans, and moonbeams. Cindy Johnson and his peppermint sticks fill every inch of stage. Marian Anderson poses her hands in alto soprano. Woody Strode, our black cowboy, wild rides the open oat fields and range. Our dusty eyes drink in Bea Richards, Dorothy Dandridge, Lena Horne. Intermission at the Lyric, lights up. Frida Jones tries on a brand new hat and no one is arrested. Bernard Lewis licks his ice cream cone on every melting side. No one is booked for licking or loitering. Morgan and Marvin Smith, the famous picture-taking twins, take our picture too. At the Lyric, we pose. Bright futures we portray. At the Lyric, we fall in love with our lips. Lucinda kisses Big Tank clear through the opening act. Julia can't see the show for looking at the ocean of their mouths, open, close. We cry at the Lyric, laugh out loud at the Lyric, whisper, quiet, here comes the principal. Miss Lucy Harth Smith proudly takes her seat. At the Lyric, William Wells Brown pulls out his indelible pen to write us down. Isaac Scott Hathaway shapes our faces in a mustard amber clay on new money. We come to the Lyric to rise, rejuvenate, see ourselves win, watch ourselves lifted up in lights, hit the home run, be hero champion of the world, only to file back out live and alive, stroll back across the rays of the 8-point star, rose tile light of return, sink back into the racetrack of the East End with everything we have now become. Sweet Lyric, Lyceum of dreams, where once we came to rise into who Mama, not dime store magazines, promised us we were. That poem is etched in acid in the wall, the glass wall at the Lyric Theater. At least it used to be, I think it still is. And this was on the occasion of the Lyric Theater undergoing a great rejuvenation and renovation and being opened again. And I was asked to write a poem for the moment. And I was incredibly honored to do so because it had been such a place for Black history and Black celebration. And I was hoping that the poem would capture some of that. I think I want to tell you, I want to say that I think that's all I'm going to read right now. I want to say that I miss Lexington deeply. I miss my community there. I miss the folks who I knew, who supported my writing and supported. I'll never forget in 2011 when Head Off and Split, the book before this one, was nominated for the National Book Award. I would walk down the streets of Lexington, and Lexington is such a book-loving place. I mean, like people who you can't imagine. It's I've never lived in a city, a small city, that loved books so much. And that was evident everywhere I went. when the nomination came out. I was walking down the street one day and there was a guy who owned a furniture store. And he was like, you know, you're gonna win. And I was like, I don't know who you are, but he knew about the National Book Award nominations. And so that's one moment. And then when I did win, which completely surprised me, I'm coming home. I have to tell this story. I'm coming home. I get off the airplane. I'm coming down the escalator. And Joan Brannon, the great Joan Brannon, drum teacher of Central Kentucky, has her drum class in Bluegrass Airport. And they're drumming for me as the escalator descends. It's a moment in my life that I'll never forget because of the love that was shown and because of the support and because they left what they were doing to come do that and welcome me back home. And I'll never forget it. So I just wanted to, that's just 2 of 2,000 moments I could mention, but I could also take questions, Dr. Price. Thank you for listening.
So I need someone to unmute me. So thank you so much for that reading. I mean, I have so many scatterings of words, and so I'm going to ask all the participants if you would type your questions in the Q&A, and we'll try in the Q&A box. We'll try and get to as many of them as we possibly can. And I kind of was thinking about the long poem you wrote about Gurney and the way in this moment activists around the death of Breonna Taylor keep referencing Hood to the Holler as a rallying cry for how we should be thinking about injustice and inequality now. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about not just the place of Kentucky, but the ways in which your time here may have helped you make lots of communal connections that maybe you would not have if you had not been here.
Communal connections to Lexington and Kentucky in specific.
Like you mentioned Gurney in the mountains and him circling your parents' farm.
Yeah.
And the
right.
And
right. I didn't, you know, and the line that ends that first stanza was just like, oh, I don't even know. I'm not sure why I'm here. You know, I'd never been in Kentucky before. I had never even passed through before. And that wasn't conscious. It just wasn't on the map where I was going. And so one of the huge things Gurney did, because the line says, I thought I was up on my Black history, but the Black history that lives in the hills of Kentucky and Tennessee and West Virginia hasn't even been tapped yet. It is so old and so rich and so historical and so essential. And he brought me this box of books to say, stay, there's some work for you here. He had done a little bit of research about what I was interested in. And so I did make connections in that way. I made connections through the Appalachian poets. I told a story last night to the students about the Appalachian poets taking 2 or 3 cars up to Lynch, Kentucky. And there was an older Black woman sitting in the audience waiting for us when we got there with a shoebox in her lap. And in that shoebox, we found out at the end of our reading, we read our poems and we kept wondering, wow, what is in that box? And she opened it up and there were poems. And the power of us coming together as a, organization of young Black writers was profound for many people who had never seen an organization of young Black writers before. And so culturally, communally, making those connections was very, very profound. And, Frank had been doing that work long before I got there with theater, with visual arts, with poetry writing. And I just kind of stepped into it because it was already going on. And so the things I learned, I'd catch the train from Lexington through, going up to Washington, D.C. because I love the train. And there were all these Black people waiting at the train stop. And I was like, what are these Black people doing here? Like, finally I realized they've been living there for generations. And so, yes, it opened my eyes to a history that I didn't know about, was not aware of, and that added to the layers of Black history I had learned and was still learning on my own in other regions, the South, the Great Migration, those kinds of things. But there were families who just hunkered down for generations in those hills and made music and made stories and made family and found a way to survive. So it was critical for me. I'm always grateful for that lesson.
So one of the Gaines Fellows was very moved by your poem from the laundromat, and asked, how do you find sources of inspiration during quarantine? And that type of question has come up from multiple people. So could you talk a little bit about finding inspiration in quarantine when it's difficult to interact face to face, and what are you thinking about in these times?
I'm thinking about writing, because if I can't be face to face, if I can't be social, which I'm not good at anyway, I want to take this time as the glass being not empty, but full. This is the time to go in. This is the time to work on something that I don't have time to when the world is pulling me to get on a plane or to go over there and do something over there. I've been home. This has been such a schizophrenic kind of moment for me because I have been tied to my house, right? I have been tied in quarantine, but I've looked at quarantine not as a bad thing as a creative person, but as a really, really, really good thing. I couldn't buy this kind of time if I tried to. This kind of quiet. One of the students, one of the Gaines students, Braden, asked me yesterday about solitude and quiet. I mean, I get up at 4 o'clock. I don't have to get dressed and go to school. I don't have to have office hours like that. I go to my desk, I teach my class. I don't like the teaching that I'm doing there, but it's what we've been given for the moment, and I'm trying to make the best of it. And then I shut that down and I go in the quiet of a glass-filled room, feel the sun, watch the trees. My garden is leaving, but I think we have to stop thinking about this as it's not what it was, but make it something you need. And it's not just a poet can do that. Make it something that grows something so that when the shift starts happening again, you're ready. You've done something. You've given birth to an idea. You've given birth to a project. You've connected with some people who are needing things. Like one of the projects that I gave myself was the Navajo Water Project. I started taking the Navajo Times online, and I found this article about how so many Navajo elders are dying, and needed water and needed electricity. And so I was like, what can I do? So I had a couple of readings, and I was like, I'm taking this money and I'm going to put it towards something, so it's like so many creative things you can do. Don't think of it as what you don't have. Think of it as a time where you have so much that you can be doing something you've never done before.
So I'm going to ask a quick question, what I think might be a quick question from Shanita Jackson. And she says, what's a moment that's made you smile recently? Knowing you is probably not quick, but it seemed like it could be.
Not quick. Right now, okay, there's so many things that make me smile. These little yellow, I'm always walking, these little yellow butterflies, they're tiny, they come out in the fall. I think they're called, I have a name for them, but they're yellow, and then you're driving and then suddenly they're just everywhere. And so last week was that week where those yellow Cornstill, something, they have a name, and they just appeared. And I just had to pull the car over to sort of watch them because I miss fireflies so much. And we're at a place where there are some fireflies, but I used to go out in the backyard and just love to watch. And so I started writing something that said the yellow butterflies, which appeared like fireflies. And there was the line that started me writing something. So I think being open to wonder and not, I think you have to cut the computer off and you have to cut the news off. You have to be active and you have to be proactive and you have to be fiercely fighting for justice in this world. But you also have to take care of yourself and you have to like pour things back into you that the body needs, and that your spirit needs to smile and to wake up the next day ready to go, ready to keep fighting for Brianna, for the 100 other things that we have to fight for in this moment where everything is being tilted away from justice and equality.
So several questions have come about writing and the forms of writing. And so I forget the person's name, but I'll find it, mentioned that she's teaching your book Heartwood right now, which I just learned is going to be re-released from the University Press of Kentucky. And another person said that poets have been doing some of the most amazing prose writing they have been reading. Could you talk a little bit about form and writing in various forms? Take it away.
Well, I study words very closely. I study words for their music. I study line breaks for music and for action. And I don't call myself a poet who writes in form, in restrictive form or in certain form, but I do call myself a poet who pays great attention to line and stanza and verb and metaphor. And so I never decide what a poem is going to look like. I never decide how long it's going to go. I write until I feel like the bowl is filled with that idea, enough so I can go back to it and take out things and add things. But everything I need to make the journey is there in that first draft. And so there's a process that is really important to me where I'm listening to what I have, and then I begin to sort of place things on, on the page, on a blackboard, which I have in my kitchen, real chalk, not a whiteboard, a blackboard. And I'm visually inclined, incredibly visually inclined. So I'm always looking at how words work side by side. I'm also looking at how what the end words, the beginning words, and the whole universe that is in the poem like that. So I can't believe Heartwood is about to be published in its 25th anniversary edition. I mean, I just can't. I have to write the foreword for that. And I'm like stunned that 25 years have passed. But the thing about Heartwood, everywhere I go, people come up to me with Heartwood in their hand. It's a little tiny short story book that I wrote at the Carnegie Center in the late 80s when I was asked to, because the Carnegie Center had a program. They were asking Kentucky writers to write a book that students who don't typically go to the library and get a book, a novel, a short story, might want to read. And so I had this wonderful array of newly graduated GED students and students who were new to reading, sitting before me, telling me what word to use and what word to take out that just wasn't working for them. And it was the greatest experience that I had, because I love words. And so they love words too. And so this book mattered so much to them. And then when I got on the road, I don't care if it was West Virginia or California, somebody would come up to me and say, this book mattered to me. And I would go, it's just incredible. So I think I answered your question about form.
I think you did. So one of our poetry faculty, Julie Johnson, has asked, I think, a really interesting question given your latest publication, which is how is going home impacted your work?
Well, whenever a writer, I think, moves anywhere, there's something shifts, right? I never planned to come back to South Carolina. My dad got diagnosed with Alzheimer's and everything changed. I knew I would come home and in the back of my mind, I knew I would always take care of my parents. I didn't want them, if I could keep them from being institutionalized, I would do that. And so I had the opportunity to come home and help my mom. And it changed my life. Those 4 years with my father as an adult, not as a 16-year-old, not as a 17-year-old, but as an adult with a job, you know, and he knew I was there for the first 3 years. He didn't know, well, I don't know what he knew in the fourth year, but those years that we had changed this book. He was not in this book. This was a book of occasional poems. And when I took care of my dad and spent that time with him and started looking through those letters that he had written to me, I started thinking about how fluid I wanted to be with the new book and how I didn't want, you don't decide what a book is going to be about and just stick to it. I don't think that's how you decide about a book. I think you follow the idea, you follow the notions that you're having. And then the things that were coming at me about him and about his beautiful handwriting. This is his handwriting on the cover, by the way. The publisher took his name from me, which was Love Child, and put it here and surprised me and made me cry. And it totally changed the book, Julia, when I came back home. And I'm open to that. When I went to Kentucky, Kentucky changed me. When I lived in California, I was feeling some of that too, but not so much. So every place you visit, every place you live, I think you take it in intrinsically in your body, in your spirit, and some of that comes out hopefully in your new work.
So I'm going to try and combine the question of one of our fellows, Mary Sherman, and then a former UK undergrad, now burgeoning doctor himself, Nathan Moore. And so Mary asked the question of, can you talk about the relationship between the autobiographical and the historical in your work? And I'm going to add on Nathan's question of, how do you work through the pain of writing about the history of Black life in this country and render the beauty? Which I think you also do with autobiography as well in your work.
So I don't know how to answer all of that in one. I'm just going to sort of jump in. A long time ago, as a very young writer, I was shaped by the Vietnam War, the Black Arts Movement, the Gay Pride Movement, the Women's Rights Movement, the assassination of Dr. King, President Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, Malcolm X, the murders that happened during the 60s, Medgar Evers. All of this was the backdrop of my childhood. I constantly was trying to ask people, what is this? How am I supposed to be in this world that is doing this to each other and to itself? And so one of the things I clearly remember as a young, not even a writer, just a person who scribbled, it's like, I want to write things that matter to people. And I want to write those things, even when they are painful, in the most beautiful way possible. I am not going to settle for one or the other. If I can't bring both of those things in together, then I don't want to put my name on it. So making something that is really painful to look at and really painful to re-experience making sure that there is beauty in it is part of my voice as a writer. That's how I see it, because I want you to come on this journey. I want you to experience the fact that my neighbor brought me this rose quartz across the street, and the beauty of that act was followed by something horrific. I want you to read the 20-page poem about George Finney, who is the youngest person murdered in an electric chair, murdered in an electric chair in this country, in the state where I live. I want you to go on that journey with me. And I still want you to put some beautiful things in your pocket, or why else would you go on this journey with me? You would just go look at the news. Poetry and art must have beauty at its heart. This is the most powerful thing I know. This is the thing that could change the whole planet. This is the thing I keep asking myself, why is this the first thing that they take off the high school, list, or the junior high list? Why do they take the money away for art? Art is the thing that lets us know who we are and lets us see other people. They take it away because it's the most powerful thing. I don't think I answered that question, but history
and autobiography
are one. I was taught as a Black girl growing up in this country that history was over there. History happened to other people. And the more I learned about myself and the more I learned about my people and my culture, I learned that I am history. My mother is history. My grandmother is history. I teach my students that. Why are you always looking for the thing you want to write about over there? We are taught that you should write about things over there. That this entity, not so much. I refuse that. I absolutely refuse that. Nobody else is going to write my story. Nobody else is going to keep my papers or my ephemera or my father's letters to me. And I want people to know that you can keep those, you can cherish them, and you can put them in books, and they can matter to more than you.
So we've had several questions, including one from someone named Claire Gittens, who's an undergraduate student from Ontario, Canada. So I don't know how she found us tonight, but I feel like her questions should be asked.
Is Claire in Ontario? My goodness.
So can she, I also love the way she says this. She wants to ask you about doneness. And do you think a poem is ever fully grown? So several people have also asked questions about how you revise.
Yes, doneness. I'm gonna get a t-shirt with that on it, Claire. Doneness. No, a poem is never done. I do 50 drafts, I finish it, I send it off. I look in this book right now where I'm so happy with the work that I did, and I go, oh, what if and I go, no, don't do that. Because I'm different. Because a year ago when I sent this to the publisher, I was one person. I've been reading and changing, and I'm never satisfied, I guess. Prince was right about that line. But it's okay, because the book has what it has, and you have to get it right to this point and then let it go. But that's why I love pencils and their democratic eraser on the top. I'm always thinking about how I might change something, or how something else might look that's been settled in the book in a certain kind of way. For me, they're never done. Yes, they're done, but they're not done. So that's okay with me. I'm okay with that. I don't think that when you see things in books, that doesn't mean they're dead. That doesn't mean they're done. That means read it for where it is now and bring what you have to it. And I'm okay with that sort of relationship with my words. in process and in print.
So we have a question from also a former colleague, Nazara Wright, and she asked
Sorry.
that I have asked of. I know someone who's in the room and has a question, Crystal Wilkinson.
Hey, Chrissy.
And I think of both of you as writing. Nazara's asking about climate and environment, but I would also like you to talk just a little bit about ecology, and the ways in which sort of living a life as a Black person in this country, how does that impact your connection to climate, environment, ecology?
Well, one of the things, I mean, this book in particular has several moments of Black girl ecology for me. I'm deeply a part of the natural world. I couldn't write what I write or even be the person that I am without the natural world being one of my primary landscapes. I walk, I think, I dream. I was born 5 minutes from the Atlantic Ocean, which appears in many of the things that introduced me and in much of my work, even back in this book again. I'm deeply worried about, how we treat the land and how we treat the ocean, and how we don't seem to understand the connection between those things and us, and why we don't see the world as an interconnected web, but actually something you can control. So the other thing that had a huge impact on me was growing up on my grandparents' farm at the top of South Carolina, where you could see the Appalachian Mountains actually from my grandfather's barn. And so I was always walking across that land. I was always looking at tadpoles. I was always finding sacred Indian stones on that land. And I was always allowed to wander. And were it not for that wandering as a girl, I would not care about Gurney taking me to Highlander and seeing and taking me and stopping on the road for those waterways. That really began part of the process of me seeing my life connected to the natural world. I still feel that very strongly. And I believe that we have to things fast so that we don't go tumbling away from all the things that are keeping us tethered both spiritually and physically here.
So I don't know if this is a quick question, but do you have a favorite non-poetry book?
I don't have a favorite non-poetry book. I don't have a favorite book. I have millions, thousands of favorite. I don't like the word favorite because it preferences, 10,000 other things that I love. But there's so many books that I read and that I care about and that make their way into my work. I like to just pick up things that I think I'm not interested in and find a source of curiosity in those as well.
So the next question comes from Frank Walker. I just wanted to, I'm going to add a bit onto it, is that I find in academia sometimes when you're doing a presentation, people will come up to you and say, that's what you should be writing about. Have you ever thought about writing about this? So his question is, can you talk to students about what you're not writing about and why? Like, are there things you say, this is not for me?
Gosh, I don't think I have anything that's not for me. That's really important. That's a great question. I think that way. I think that I'm always looking for my way in to something. I don't think that I have any stops, I don't pull up any curtains over any idea or any thing. When I'm things come to me, things stick like Velcro. and that's what I wrestle with. But I don't think I can think of anything that I wouldn't write about. And one of the things that this book is about, and this book holds, it has occasional poems, and occasional poems always get a bad rap, like, oh, they're not, you weren't really inspired to write that. But that's not true. I have to be.
Can you explain for those people who may not know what an occasional poem is?
Yes, an occasional poem is usually poems that were usually written for weddings, funerals, things like that. And they weren't, always, you were asked, to write a poem for some occasion. The book begins, it says, throughout human history, occasions have always elicited poetry from humans whose feet the moment has fallen before. It has been my experience that the request to compose an occasional poem has not always been a welcome one. But I had not heard about the history of occasional poems when I began writing them, because I began writing them not as this big Greek or Roman category of poetry, right? I began writing them because somebody in my little small southern town said, hey, poet girl, Miss Robinson is turning 90 years old next week. Can you write her a little poem? And I would go, oh yes, let's get to work on that. I felt responsible in my community. People began to know that I loved poetry and even tried my hand at it here and there. And so when they asked me for occasions that came up in our community, I wanted to represent. I wanted to do my thing. And so I wrote poems in those moments. And so those were my formal first moments of writing occasional poetry. So I bring that into the context of, different universities, like Wofford College was renovating its main administration building. And they wanted to put up a plaque that said, this building was built by enslaved labor. And they sent me a box of historical documents to look through to write the poem in this book called The Thinking Men, which I really wanted to write it. And so I like being called upon to fill in some of the gaps of history, that person who asked about history and autobiography, because I think it has to do with filling some of the gaps that we need to fill in this society and in this world. And I think art does that in a powerful way. Use me, I say to people. If I'm inspired by it, I can write by it. And so that's why I never say what I don't want to write about, because I'm always going to turn it a little bit, I think, and twist it into something that I do want to write about, or make you look through a different window about it. Yeah.
Patricia Smith says that you have written the best, quote, Destiny Trump, unquote, poem I've ever heard. How are your current political and cultural frustrations working their way through your poetry, especially since, as you say, you're a slow writer who may take years to fully process? So can you talk about process?
Yeah, first of all, I love Patricia Smith, and I'm a student of her glorious, gorgeous way of writing. Okay, back to the question. I love you, girl. Just like I love Chrissy, and I can't talk to you or see you, and this is very hard.
Who's next?
I'm sorry. Huh?
Who's next?
I just want to say, I am determined not to let the world rush me. I am determined to get off the world's roller coaster. I am fighting for my life with this present president. I will do everything in my power to assemble alphabets, numbers, dashes, periods, commas, colons, M dashes, capital letters, and anything else to go against his tyranny, period. I will do it in my way. I will do it as a poet, and I will do it in the kindest way I have been taught as a child and a Southern girl. But I will do it, because everybody who does anything, if you garden, if you make poems, if you make art, if you're the president of an institution, if you're a teacher, if you do topiary, if you mop floors, everybody needs to stand in power for telling the truth. The thing that has hurt me deeply is not to see people standing and saying what my grandmother taught me. A lie is a lie, no matter who tells it. And so I have to compose a poem that does not rant, that does not shout, that throws fire in its own way. And then I have to move out of the way after I do that and go on to something else. I have to go back. But I appreciate that from somebody who throws fire as well. And it matters to me because Patricia Smith is in my circle and is in my community and she knows. She knows.
She says, I love you, sis. So normally when we do these Q&As, I don't call people's names, but I know how important it is for you to speak these people's names into the room.
Because I can't see anybody. I just see beautiful you, but I can't see anybody else.
So Crystal Wilkinson said, speaking of forms, can you talk about Frog March? I don't know what that is. But you will know.
Well, Frog March, only your girls would like release your secrets to the world. Frog March is the book I'm working on now. And Crystal and I used to meet at the coffee shops and on the benches in the park. And we used to read our work to each other, our fiction work. And Frog March has been going for about 30 years, but I'm about to do it finally. And now that I've got Love Child out. So Frog March is a long story. I'm just going to say it like that. And it's happening, Crystal. It's happening. That's all I want to say. I can't talk about it because I can't talk about something I'm in the middle of writing. So, but she has now given the name to the world. So thanks, Chrissy. Appreciate that.
So I don't know that I adequately captured Frank's question because he came back.
Okay.
But he basically, and along with Willie Kennard III, are asking questions about risk, right? How to get students like to focus on joy, but how do you negotiate risk and joy in your poems? And Frank is asking, why students should consider writing poems they are avoiding?
Oh,
that's a very
that's a very different question. And that's why you're there. You're there to like uncover, to scoop, to take the paleontology tools, the little tiny brushes and the dig, and to get to the thing that matters to you. Why do this? Why do this if you're not writing something that is uncovering something about you and helping the world to uncover something it needs to uncover? So the thing that scares you, stay right there and realize, I had a reading once and the guy said, keep walking into the high water. You must trust that, here's the water line. You're not going to go under. When I'm writing and I'm getting really, really close to the water line, I have to keep going. And that's why I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning to work on it again. If you're just going to write something that has no skin in the game, if it doesn't have any value to your heartbeat, if it's not going to make it pump faster, why are you there? Do you want to wear a scarf that says I'm a poet? Do you want to wear a little cute hat that says, look at me, I've, been nominated for something? Or do you really want to wrestle as a human being with something we all need to be better, to look at the world differently? I worked on that Gurney poem because Gurney took me to the mountain. And he said, look, you all cute. You're calling yourselves the Appalachian poets and you're doing this wonderful thing. But this life that we need for the next generation, these waterways are leaving us. What can you do? So if you're just twiddling your toes, I'm going to push you in a different kind of way as a teacher and as a poet, because we need art now. Now is when we need art and artists pushing, saying things that make our eyes water, that make our heart beat fast, that make us wonder, do I have a job tomorrow? Fire me, but don't give me a C, and don't try to edit me, and don't try to hush me up, because what I'm saying has come from a continuum of other really important voices in the world asking us to remember our humanity and help each other.
So as I'm calling names, my sister just texted me to say that your voice is echoing through my mother's house, and it's beautiful to hear. Um, so I want to ask a question for Ash Baker, who talks about the Gurney poem again, and in the form of the ode,
Mhm.
and so I know that you have written a lot about your teachers throughout your work. There is always a kind of poem of this kind, and he asks if you think there's something almost sacred about passing knowledge that results in these types of lovely and generous odes.
Oh, yes, 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 yes. Sacred. We must never take that for granted. When I write about Dr. Gales coming up to me on that wall at Talladega College saying, Miss Finney, have you read all the books in the library? And my girls start laughing because they think it's funny that she would ask me that question. She knew what she was asking me. And I said, no, Dr. Gales, I haven't read all the books in the library. And then she turned and left without saying, come with me, because I was supposed to know that. How can I teach anybody if I don't remember what has been taught to me? How can I ask you to write about something you're scared to write about if I'm not scared to write about it? This is something that is so sacred, and thank you for saying and knowing that. And thank you for putting it in that context, because I feel like we're losing some of that sacredness, because everybody thinks that this is something just to be televised and not to be taught, something to be tweeted and not to live. You know, I want to live what I'm writing. I believe in it that much. I believe in what Gurney taught me. I believe in what Dr. Gales taught me. I am not here because I'm special. I'm here because I'm stubborn. I'm here because I will not let somebody erase what I feel and what I see off the planet Earth. And there are others like me.
Okay. So we have the final few questions are from students. So we're going to get those in as we're coming to a close. And one is, what are some of the poems that are exceptionally close to you, or about an exceptionally emotionally charged subject that inspire you personally?
Well, I almost just lost it reading this poem about Gurney, because I remember it really, really well. And I was also thinking about I'm often teary these days because I feel like so much is at stake with us as human beings. I I don't know. This book is personal, and the act of writing is a personal act. It's an act of faith that I attempt every day, and um, I don't treasure one poem over the other. The whole every time I do it, I'm grateful. I feel lucky and fortunate, and I don't want to pretend that it's easy. It's not easy. but it is so worthy and so ungilded. And I believe, I hope I'm planting something that can be eaten and plucked and grown someplace else, or I wouldn't do it.
So we have two quick questions that we're going to try to get in. And one is, do you think Kentucky is exceptional from the rest of the South and or from the rest of Appalachia? Is there something different about this place?
Well, I don't know about, I can only say what I know having lived there. I don't know if it's exceptional to other places because I haven't lived there, and I don't want to make some intellectual sort of qualifier. There was something in the air in Kentucky that I have not felt in any other place that I have lived. There is something spiritual, I feel like, that is above it in terms of planetariness. When I read stories about, there's so many things, Crystal and I have talked about this so much, but when I read stories about enslaved Africans and the horror that they experienced in Kentucky, I don't want to call it an exceptional place, right? But when I read stories about enslaved people who did exceptional things, some of them ran away from Kentucky, having been in Kentucky, to Washington, D.C. with patents and things like that. You start saying, whoa, what was happening in Kentucky? There's something there. I don't know what it is. I felt it more than I can talk about it. And I hope that makes sense.
So this one question, I'm going to give you the last two questions together. And one is, what is the last line you've written that made you stand up? I really like that. And then could you just talk a little bit about the things that inspire you to keep working, right? So sometimes you'll see writers who reach your status with multiple books and accolades, and then their writing begins to fade. So what are the things that inspire you? That's from Megan Yaldoff, who's a fellow. And Robaloo asked the question about the line that made you stand up. But could you talk to us about what are the things that continue to inspire you to write poetry? I'm sorry, it's the lawyer in me, the compound questions. Can't help it.
You know, I have a friend who was a dancer. We're the same age, and she can't do ballet anymore. She's early 60s and her knees don't work so well. And one of the things that I tease her about is my knees never had to work like that. And right now, brain function is still 1,000%. Heart function, 2,000%. Heart function increasing, brain function steady, hand 5,000%. I can do my work still in this world. I don't need anything but a pencil and a piece of paper and clarity of vision, empathy, and a desire to get it down on paper. Inspire me? I am inspired every single day. But it's because I love life and I love being alive and I love fighting to the death for something that's right. My teachers taught me that. The people I cherish taught me that. Jane Vance, poet at UK, gave me that. I will never forget Jane Vance and how generous she was when I was there. And Wendell Berry, whose office was right beside mine for 1 year. I have had so many blessings from people. How could I not pass that on in my own life? It doesn't make sense to me. It's just like, That's what you do. You're here, you're alive. If you can't be generous, then what are you? I don't know. So line that made me. I love that, I stand up when I write a good line. Oh, I don't know who did that, but so I'm writing The Thinking Men. The Thinking Men is about enslaved labor that built Wofford College building. And I remember I'm imagining magically real, I'm having this magical realism historical moment where I'm thinking about the men who did this building. And part of the thing was that this bell would ring and they knew the building is so perfect. I mean, only a mathematician could have built this building. It's so architecturally supreme. And so I wrote this last line is it's a standalone line. And the men are leaving the room for the day. The bell has rung. And the guy who built the room, who measured it out, knows that he will not be able to go to school in this building, but somebody else will. With rule and plain that the good sun could bounce here, this light and learning floor was the way forward through the wilderness. Why else keep it from us with such force and might? He's wondering, why else keep something like this from us? Why keep a room that's going to be a school from people like us? They would like us to believe that some men are born to read and turn the pages, while other men are born to walk on nails and turn the earth. I stood up. I was like, yes. Some men are born to walk and turn the pages, books, and some men are born to walk and turn the earth. I like it.
So we've gotten so many expressions of love, and
I want them. Why can't I see them?
I think you could, but we'll see.
I'm so glad you guys came out here. I'm so glad. Melinda, thank you for this. This was I feel I can't thank you enough. I can't thank people for showing up, and I just want to say, it's our world. It's the good people's world, and we have to fight for it to be a good place. We have to. It's not going to happen on its own. And so if you care about poetry or art or Red River Gorge or the ocean or the birds in the sky or Breonna Taylor's truth, do something that you don't usually do. Get involved. We need good people involved in this fight because, we don't have a lot of money. We just don't, but we have a lot of fight. We have a lot of fire. And you know what? It matters to the universe. So I thank you for coming and listening, and give them hell, Kamala. Sorry, had to get that in.
Thank you so much for your loving and fierce commitment to the truth in a time where dishonesty is valorized. So thank you for joining us. And you'll be able to, if you want to watch this again, you could go to the University of Kentucky Gaines Center for the Humanities YouTube channel tomorrow, and you could be blessed all over again. Thank you so much. And if you're moving around, have a safe trip home. Be safe.
Hey, Kate Black. Sorry.